So, when was the last time that someone knocked on your door and asked you if you were playing out? I'm going to guess that for most of us this is quite some time ago. No one's asked you if you were playing out since you were a kid, right? And who was it that came to ask you to play out? Now, if you're like me, the first person that's going to come to your mind is your best friend. My best friend was Gareth Baines. He lived around the corner. We were in the same class, so we'd walk back to school, to and from school together. And there was lots of reasons why he was my best friend, but I'll be honest with you, one of them was he had the coolest toys. Other people that called for me were Karen and David. They were brother and sister. They're what I'm going to call my wholesome friends. We very rarely argued. We always got on. We would go on epic bike rides together. We would have picnics. We fancied ourselves as a little bit of an Enid Blyton kind of famous 5, Secret 7 kind of gang. But the coolest thing about Karen and David is that they had a garage which their mum and dad would let us create our own theatre in now and again. We put on the best shows that that small town of Gloucester had ever seen. And not only that, but we made a bit of money out of it. We charged our parents to come and see us. We were entrepreneurs. Bad actors, but entrepreneurs. And then the other people that came to call for us were the people that always seemed to get us into trouble. For me, that was a guy called Victor McGagger. Now, McGregor's not his real name. I've changed his name to protect his identity. But Victor, you know who you are. And it seems like it was such a long time ago that it seems unnecessary to continue to point fingers or lay blame. But I just want to make it absolutely clear. I didn't even want to climb on that school roof. And left to my own devices, I wouldn't have climbed on that school roof. I was a milk monitor. I had responsibilities. But yet, there was something about Victor's dangerous games that were very exciting. And I knew at the moment that I was shimmying up that drain pipe, clinging on for dear life, I knew that no good was going to come of this. And I was only 10, so I couldn't foresee the police chase that followed, or the broken ankle, or the look of shame on my mum's face when I was brought home in a police car. But I did know it was going to get me into trouble. And the interesting thing is, whenever Victor got me into trouble, my mum would say to me, "Why did you do that?" And I would say, "Victor told me." And the question that follows is, if Victor told you to jump off a cliff, would you? And I know the answer should be no, but yes, because Victor's dangerous games were exciting. Victor's dangerous games made me feel alive. I didn't know this at the time, and I would never have called it this, but Victor was pushing me outside of my comfort zone. Every day with Victor was a journey of self-discovery. Now, I just want to check, we all had a friend like Victor when we were growing up, didn't we? Hands up for me if when you were growing up you had a friend like Victor. Yeah, there's a few of us. But the question I really want to know is, hands up for me if you were Victor when we were growing up. Okay, a few troublemakers out there. Now, this is really interesting for me, and I found out a little bit about who came to call for us, but I want to know now about what games we played. Now, there's hundreds of games that we played as a kid, but I'm just going to go through 10 of them. I'm going to call out 10 games, and what I want you to do, if you played these games when you were younger, is just stick your hand up in the air for me. So, the first game I have is, who here when you were younger played hide and seek? Hands up for me if you played hide and seek. Yep. Hands up for me if when you were younger you played mums and dads. Or a few mums and dads. Hands up if when you were younger you played any goodies v baddies game. That's a popular one. Hands up for me if when you were younger you ever played with Lego. Oh, Lego's a good one. Hands up for me if when you were younger you ever used to put your coat on just by the hood and pretend you were a superhero. Yeah. Hands up for me if when you were younger you ever played with dolls. And hands up those who played with Action Man or action figures. Now this is interesting. I ask who plays with dolls, and it's mostly women who put their hands up. When I ask who plays with Action Man, the guys put their hands up. But what is Action Man if he's not a doll? But that's an entire other TED Talk. 2 more questions for you. Who here, when you were younger, ever played a game where you created a human barrier, maybe 5 or 6 of you, you sent your friend over there and they had to charge at you, you might have called it Bulldogs, or Kabaddi, or Red Rover? Yeah. Banned in every playground, but yet Victor made us play it still. And my final question, who here when you were younger played Kiss Catch or Kiss Chase? Oh, a popular game. I've got the measure of my audience now, and it's Kiss Catch. Okay. So I could go on all day. The games that people play fascinate me. As a youth and community worker, games form a massive part of my work. And I'm interested in why people play games. I'm interested in the games that people play. I'm interested in who people play with, who we don't play with, Why is it that sometimes we won't play with certain people? But the two things that fascinate me the most, and what I want to talk to you about today, is how we learn through play and how play creates community. So, how do we learn through play? Well, biologists and behavioral psychologists have known for a long time that our brains are literally hardwired to learn through play. And actually, what this means is that when we play, there's a whole host of neurological stuff that happens in our brain that actually switches on all the parts of our brain that allow us to make connections, that allow us to learn. So when we play, we actually develop both socially and emotionally as well as cognitively. And if you're in early years, or if you've got any kids of your own, you'll know this without necessarily understanding the science behind it. Because as kids, we pretty much learn everything by playing, or at least a playful exploration of the world. We learned how to count by playing shops. We learned a lot through singing songs about the wheels on the bus and our bodies with head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And we tasted electricity. Do you remember when you put the square battery on your tongue and you tasted electricity? And this is how we learn and develop and discover things. But something changes. It seems that the older we get, the less we play. And this is sold to us as part of our growing up. This is how we mature. Children play, adults do more serious stuff, like go to work and pay the bills and tidy the house. And let's be honest, if you work full time, there is little enough time to go to work, pay the bills, and tidy the house, let alone play. But seeing this as a dichotomous choice, as either we work or we play, is one of the biggest mistakes we make. And I want to demonstrate that to you by telling you about something called serious games. Now, serious games are games which have been designed to develop a solution to a real-world problem. And one example of a serious game is something called Fold It, which has been developed by the University of Washington. Now, Fold It basically allows amateur scientists to go online and to play with or fold the structures of proteins in order to develop a three-dimensional model. Now, to some scientists in the room, you'll have totally got what I've just said. Some of us might need a little bit more explanation of what I mean by that, and I want to demonstrate what I mean by that with Lego. So I want you to imagine that it's your birthday. You've just unwrapped what's possibly the best gift you've ever got. It is a Lego pirate ship box set. Yes. Now you open the box, and in that box is 100 or so pieces of Lego, which you know, if put together in the right order, give you your very own shiny galleon pirate ship, just like the picture on the box. But if those Lego pieces are not put in the right order, even if you just do it slightly wrong, what you're left with does not look like what's on the box. And it doesn't matter how much your dad tries to convince you that they're more or less the same. More or less the same isn't the same, is it, Dad? So, this is pretty much what Fold It does. It allows amateur scientists the opportunity to go online and to play around with protein structures to develop 3D models. And why is this important? Well, for the past decade, scientists have been trying to understand the particular shape of a particular protein that is responsible for HIV and AIDS. And if we could understand the shape of this protein, then that would have major implications on developing effective antiviral drugs. So scientists have this problem, scientists have this computer game, and what they did was put the problem into the computer game. Within 10 days, 3 people had discovered the structure to this protein. Now, this is absolutely amazing, and what this tells us is that a well-designed game actually makes us smarter. What this tells us is that a well-designed game can actually allow us to approach a problem way more creatively, way more critically than we would have done otherwise. Well-designed games allow us to successfully collaborate with other people, to build on other people's successes and failures, and see failures as part of our learning. Failures are prototypes. So that's a very interesting way in which we learn through play. But the other thing that I wanted to talk about is how play creates community. And I'm going to tell you that by telling you about 3 specific cultural events in which people get together and play. So this is Tomatina. It's a festival that happens in northern Spain in a town called Buñol, and it's basically a massive food fight. 40,000 people descend on this town and chuck tomatoes at each other. Now, the authorities have tried to ban this game on a number of occasions, not least because of the mess that it creates. As adults, we don't like games that create mess, because someone's got to clean it up at some point. Now, the interesting thing about this is that actually, despite the fact that authorities have tried to ban it, it keeps coming back. People refuse to let it go. And this is because, as adults, we get such little opportunity to play that we cling to those moments as best we can. Children get to play regularly, children get to play spontaneously, but as adults, we have to put it on our diary and call it culture. And should you want to put it in your diary, it's the last Wednesday in August. This is Holi. Holi is the Hindu festival of colour. Now, unlike Tomatina, which was culturally specific to a small place in Spain, Holi is a religious festival and has wider significance and therefore is celebrated across the world. Again, as a religious festival, there's lots of rituals involved in Holi, but what people know it most for is the throwing of coloured powder and the throwing of coloured water. Now, I participated in a Holi event a couple of years ago, and it was honestly one of the best things that I'd ever done. And it's a really great example of how games and play can create community. Now, of course, people went to this event that knew each other, friends and family, but strangers got together, and it's the only place where you can throw water at a stranger and get away with it. And what happens is people have a desire to connect with each other. People want to be together. We enjoy playing with other people. Now, this connection might at first seem as if it's fleeting. We get together, we enjoy our time in that place, and then we move off, go our separate ways, and we'll probably never see each other again. But actually, one of the interesting things about playing games is that desire to connect lingers for a little while after we've played a game. And you might have noticed this yourself. When you play games, when you've finished, you're actually a little more open to the world. You're actually more likely to talk to strangers. You actually have a desire to stay connected that little bit longer. Now, I'm the kind of person that will pretty much talk to anybody anywhere. And a friend of mine moved back down to London a couple of years ago. And when I went to visit her, she shouted at me for trying to talk to randoms on the tube. We don't do that here, Lenny, is what she told me. But then, when the Olympics were on, she told a different story. She rang me up and she was like, Lenny, we're talking on the tube. And the interesting thing here was that the Olympics created community, or at least it exposed community that was already there. As humans, we desperately want to connect with people. We are social animals. And actually, what the games did was allowed people to connect. And the interesting thing about the Olympics is that it demonstrates that you don't even have to play a game to feel the magic of it. That actually spectating in a game is enough magic to make you want to connect with other people. So the Olympics came, the Olympics went, people talked on the tube, people stopped talking on the tube, but they'll start talking again when the next games comes along, whether that's Wimbledon or whether that's the World Cup. Now, this is cheese rolling in Cooper's Hill in Gloucestershire, England. The Spanish have tomatina, the Hindus have Holi, us Brits roll a cheese down a hill. We know how to live. Now, unlike Holi and tomatina, which has no winners or losers as such, here we do have a winner. And the winner is the first person to make it down the hill. And the interesting thing here is that this is an immensely dangerous game. The authorities have distanced themselves from this game because of the horrendous accidents that happen. Now, despite this fact, despite the fact of the personal risk, despite the fact of its apparent nonsense, and despite the fact that the prize for winning is simply that cheese, people flock from around the world to come and play this and to watch this, which tells me that sometimes we need very little reason to play a game. So this is all well and good. No doubt you've had a great trip down memory lane thinking about the people you used to play with and the games you used to play. But I actually want this to be a bit more than that. I want this to be a call to action. Pat Kane, the author of The Play Ethic, says that play will be to the 21st century what work has been to the last 300 years of the industrial age. Our dominant way of knowing, doing, and creating value. And that's how I want you to go out and think about play. I want you to leave here and tell people about serious games and fold it so that adults can remember that play is a legitimate way in which we learn. I want you to leave here and perhaps go and play more sports, even if you're rubbish at it. If you enjoy it, go and play it. I also want you to leave here and look out for these cultural activities that I'm talking about, whether they're the big ones of Holi or whether they're much smaller community-based activities. But go and do it and actually just look at how it feels afterwards and how you want to continue making connections. And those of you who are a little bit more brave can actually go and be spontaneous with your movements again. So remember when you were a kid, we used to skip places, we used to run places, we used to balance on the curb. We also used to leapfrog over posts. And we also used to call for our friends unannounced and ask them to play out. Which brings us back to where we started. When was the last time someone knocked on your door and asked you if you were playing out? On that note, it's time for me to go. I have been Lenny, or as I'm sometimes known, Super Lenny.